I still remember the smell of antiseptic and cold coffee that filled the hospital room the night my family abandoned me. Funny how certain moments burn themselves into your memory forever, not because they were loud or dramatic, but because something inside you quietly broke while nobody was looking. I was lying there with tubes running into my arm, my chest wrapped in bandages after emergency surgery, staring at the ceiling tiles while my wife argued with my son near the doorway like I wasn't even alive anymore. They thought I was asleep. That was the part that hurt the most. People tell the truth when they think you can't hear them. "We can't keep wasting time here," my son muttered impatiently, checking his phone every few seconds. "The lawyer appointment is tomorrow morning." My wife lowered her voice, but not enough. "Just wait until he's discharged. Don't start this now." "Discharged," he scoffed. "Mom, look at him. You really think he's going back to normal after this?" There was silence after that, long enough for me to realize neither of them disagreed. I wanted to open my eyes and ask what exactly they meant by normal, but my body felt too weak, too heavy. I stayed quiet, but I was watching everything. My daughter stood near the window with her arms crossed, pretending to cry whenever nurses walked past the room, but the second they disappeared, her expression flattened into annoyance. "I canceled my vacation for this," she whispered. Do you know how embarrassing it was explaining this to Mark's parents? That word embarrassed landed harder than the pain in my chest. 42 years of sacrifice, overtime shifts, missed birthdays, sleepless nights, mortgage payments, tuition fees, fixing everyone's problems, carrying everyone's burdens, and my heart attack was embarrassing for them. I wanted to believe stress was making them cold. I wanted to believe fear was making them act strange. But deep down, something dark had already started growing inside me long before that hospital room. Because that night wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment I finally stopped making excuses for them. The truth is, my family had been slowly erasing me for years, one disrespectful moment at a time, and I had allowed it because I thought love meant endurance. My name is Daniel Mercer, and for most of my life, I believed a man's job was to protect his family no matter the cost. My father raised me that way. He worked himself into an early grave at 58, and even during chemotherapy, he kept apologizing for not doing enough. I swore I'd never let my own family struggle the way we had. So I became the dependable one, the provider, the fixer. If the car broke down, I handled it. If bills piled up, I worked overtime. If someone needed money, I found it. When my wife Karen wanted a bigger kitchen, I refinanced a house. When my son Tyler crashed his second car in college, I paid for another one. When my daughter Emily decided she wanted a destination wedding in Italy after already maxing out 3 credit cards, I drained half my retirement savings so she could have the perfect day. Every sacrifice came with the same reward. Temporary appreciation followed by new expectations. But you don't notice you're being used when the people using you call it love. Karen and I met when we were both 23. Back then she used to hold my hand during movies and laugh so hard at my stupid jokes, she'd snort soda through her nose. She made me feel important in a way nobody ever had. When we married, I truly believed we'd grow old together. And maybe part of her believed it too once. But over the years, something changed. Or maybe success simply revealed who everyone really was. When I started my logistics company at 34, we had nothing but debt and a tiny rented office above a laundromat. I worked 18-hour days building that business from scratch. Karen used to support me then. She'd bring coffee to the office late at night. She'd tell me she was proud of me. But once the company succeeded, once the money started flowing, gratitude slowly transformed into entitlement. The bigger the house became, the smaller I seemed inside it. Tyler inherited my stubbornness, but none of my discipline. He jumped between careers every year, always chasing shortcuts. Real estate, cryptocurrency, sports betting, consulting. Every failed venture somehow became my responsibility to fix financially. Emily was different, smarter, colder. She knew exactly how to manipulate emotions without ever raising her voice. If Tyler bullied me openly, Emily did it with disappointment and guilt. "Dad, I just thought families supported each other," she'd say whenever I hesitated to write another check. Karen became the bridge between them, always smoothing over their behavior. They're young, she'd insist. Don't be so hard on them. But they weren't young anymore. Tyler was 32. Emily was 35. Yet somehow I was still funding emergencies every few months. I ignored the warning signs because I thought that was what fathers did. Then came the year everything shifted. It started with exhaustion. I blamed work at first. My chest would tighten during meetings. I'd feel dizzy climbing stairs. Karen barely noticed. She was too busy planning renovations for the vacation property she wanted near the lake. One night during dinner, I mentioned maybe slowing down at work. Tyler laughed outright. Retire? Doing what? You go insane after 2 weeks. Emily smirked. Besides, the company basically is you. If you leave, won't profits tank? I remember how quickly Karen changed the subject after that. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now I realize they were terrified, not for me, but for the lifestyle attached to me. The night of the heart attack, I had stayed late finalizing contracts. My assistant begged me to go home because I looked pale. I ignored her. Around midnight, pain exploded through my chest so violently I collapsed beside my desk. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital after surgery. And the first thing I saw was Tyler angrily whispering into his phone about stock transfers. Even then, the strange thing defended him in my mind. I told myself, fear makes people selfish. But the stranger in the next bed changed everything. His name was Vincent Hale, 73 years old, thin as paper, with silver hair and eyes too sharp for a man supposedly recovering from pneumonia. He spent the first day mostly silent, reading newspapers and occasionally glancing toward my side of the room whenever my family visited. On the third night, after Karen left early claiming she needed proper sleep, Vincent finally spoke. You built something substantial, didn't you? His voice was calm, almost casual. I frowned weakly. Excuse me. He folded his newspaper carefully. Your family talks loudly when they think nobody's listening. Heat crawled up my neck. You heard that? Hard not to. He studied me for a moment. They're waiting for you to die. I felt anger immediately. Defensive, automatic anger. That's not true. Vincent nodded slowly like he'd expected the response. That's what I told myself about my sons 20 years ago. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because some awful part of me feared he was right. Vincent looked back at his paper. The difference between love and dependence becomes obvious the second money disappears. His words followed me all night. The next morning, Tyler arrived alone. He barely asked how I felt before launching into business questions. The board's nervous, he said while scrolling through emails. People are wondering who takes over recovery takes months. I'll recover, I muttered. He forced a smile that never reached his eyes. Of course. Then his phone rang. He stepped into the hallway, but left the door partly open. I heard every word. No, not yet, he whispered harshly. The trust stays locked unless he's declared medically incapable. I know. Just stall them until we know more. My stomach turned cold. When he returned, I pretended to sleep. He stood there watching me for several seconds. Not with concern. Calculation. That was the moment something inside me finally cracked open. Vincent was reading again when Tyler left. Without looking up, he said quietly, "Now you believe me." I stared at the ceiling for a long time before answering. I don't understand what happened to them. Vincent sighed softly. People don't become greedy overnight. They reveal it in layers. Over the next few days, Vincent and I spoke more. His story mirrored mine in ways that unsettled me. He had built a chain of manufacturing companies, supported his family endlessly, ignored disrespect. Then after a stroke, his children fought over control before he'd even regained speech. I recovered, he told me, but I never forgot hearing my oldest son ask the doctor how long recovery usually took at my age. He chuckled bitterly. Amazing how quickly grief turns into scheduling. One evening, while rain hammered against the hospital windows, Vincent asked me something that changed the course of everything. Tell me honestly, Daniel, if you vanished tomorrow, who in your family would mourn you, and who would mourn losing access to you? I couldn't answer, because I already knew. The next morning, Karen arrived unusually cheerful. Too cheerful. She sat beside my bed, holding coffee she never offered me. "Honey," she began gently, "there's something we should discuss once you're feeling stronger." I watched her carefully. "What?" "Just practical matters. The company, the estate, future planning." My chest tightened again, but this time from rage, not illness. "I'm not dead." Her smile flickered. "Of course not. Don't be dramatic." Dramatic. After surviving emergency surgery. I noticed then that she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. "Where's your ring?" I asked suddenly. Her hand instinctively hid beneath her purse strap. "I had it cleaned." Lie. Small, stupid, obvious lie. After 38 years together, I knew every expression she made when hiding something. She changed the subject immediately. "Emily thinks it may be best if Tyler helps oversee some company operations temporarily." "Tyler?" I nearly laughed despite the pain. "He couldn't manage a lemonade stand." Her face hardened for half a second before softening again. "You always underestimate him." "No, I just see him clearly." That afternoon, after she left, Vincent leaned toward me slightly. "Check your finances." I frowned. "What?" "Check everything." There was something in his voice that made my blood run cold. When the nurse brought my phone later that evening, I spent hours going through accounts despite my trembling hands. At first, everything seemed normal. Then I noticed several unusually large transfers over the past 6 months. Joint accounts I rarely monitored closely. Payments labeled as property consulting, investment restructuring. Nearly $300,000 gone in fragments, small enough not to trigger immediate alarm. My hand shook harder as I dug deeper. One account led to a luxury condo purchased downtown, not under Karen's name, under Tyler's LLC. Another transfer funded Emily's husband's failing restaurant venture, despite her previously claiming they never accepted family handouts. Worst of all was discovering Karen had quietly added both children as secondary beneficiaries to several major accounts months earlier. No discussion, no explanation, just signatures slipped into stacks of paperwork. I trusted her enough not to scrutinize. I felt physically sick, not because of the money, because betrayal hits differently when it's disguised as family responsibility. I barely slept that night. Memories kept replaying through my mind with horrifying new clarity. Tyler pushing me to sign documents quickly before meetings. Emily insisting I simplify complicated financial structures. Karen encouraging me to let her handle things while I focused on work. Red flags everywhere. I had simply refused to see them. The next morning, Vincent looked at me once and immediately knew. "You found something." I nodded slowly. "How do you survive realizing your family sees you as an asset instead of a person?" He was quiet for a long moment before answering. "You stop confusing blood with loyalty." Around noon, a young nurse entered to check my vitals. After she left, I noticed my phone missing from the bedside table. Panic surged through me until I heard voices outside the door. "Tyler, Karen, Emily, did you get it?" Emily whispered. "Relax," Tyler muttered. If he saw anything, he would have said something already. My heartbeat thundered painfully. "Just delete the banking alerts," Karen hissed nervously, "and put it back before he notices." I closed my eyes instantly as the door opened. Tyler slipped the phone onto the table beside me. I felt him watching my face carefully. "Still sleeping," he murmured. They stayed only 15 minutes before leaving again. The second they were gone, I opened my eyes. My chest burned with a fury so intense it almost frightened me. They stole my phone while I lay recovering from surgery. They were covering tracks, manipulating accounts, preparing for my death like businessmen negotiating a merger. And somehow, they still believed themselves to be the victims. That was their biggest mistake, because in trying to rush control, they showed me everything before they realized I was paying attention. I stayed quiet, but I was watching everything. 2 days later, my attorney Richard Benson visited unexpectedly. Richard had been my friend since college, one of the few people I trusted completely. The moment he entered the room, I saw concern spread across his face. "Jesus, Dan." He pulled a chair beside the bed. "You look terrible." I feel worse. I glanced toward Vincent, who pretended to keep reading while clearly listening. I need to ask you something carefully. Richard's expression sharpened immediately. Okay. Have Karen or the kids contacted you recently about estate documents? A pause. Too long. Richard, he exhaled slowly. Tyler called 3 days ago asking hypothetically what would happen if he became permanently incapacitated. My stomach dropped, and I told him hypothetically he should mind his own damn business. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Richard lowered his voice. Dan, what's going on? For the next hour, I told him everything. The transfers, the hidden beneficiaries, the stolen phone, the whispered conversations. By the end, Richard looked furious. I knew Tyler was irresponsible, but this, he shook his head. Do you want me to freeze account access? I looked toward the window where rain streaked down the glass like tears. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then quietly, carefully, I replied, No. Richard blinked. No, not yet. Because suddenly I understood something important. If I confronted them immediately, they'd deny everything, twist the narrative, call me paranoid from medication and stress. No, if I wanted the truth, real truth, I needed to let them believe I was weak, vulnerable, unaware. I needed them comfortable enough to expose themselves fully. Vincent smiled faintly when Richard left. There it is, he murmured. What? The moment a man stops being prey. I looked at him carefully. You knew this would happen. I suspected. He folded his newspaper neatly. People reveal their character fastest around money and illness. That evening, Karen arrived carrying homemade soup like some devoted wife in a commercial. You seem better, she said brightly. Funny how near-death experiences change perspective. I studied her face. The woman I had loved for almost 4 decades suddenly felt like a stranger wearing familiar skin. Karen, I asked quietly, if I died tomorrow, would you miss me? She froze for the smallest fraction of a second before forcing a laugh. What kind of question is that? Just answer. Her smile faded slightly. Of course I would. But she never actually said yes. That haunted me long after she left. Around midnight, Vincent finally told me the secret that connected our lives in ways I never could have imagined. There's a reason I recognize your name, he said softly from the darkness of his bed. I turned toward him. What do you mean? He hesitated. 27 years ago, before your company became successful, you made a delivery during a snowstorm. My heart skipped. I remembered instantly. How do you know that? Because the man trapped inside the overturned truck was my younger brother. Silence swallowed the room. Memories flooded back. I had been driving supplies through brutal weather for extra money when I saw the wreck off the highway. Most cars kept going because conditions were dangerous. But I stopped, crawled through freezing snow, pulled a bleeding man from Twisted Metal minutes before the truck caught fire. I never even learned his full name afterward. Vincent's eyes glistened faintly in the dark. You saved his life. I couldn't speak. My brother spent years trying to find you afterward, Vincent continued. Said the man who rescued him disappeared before paramedics even arrived. I stared at him in shock. I didn't know. Vincent nodded slowly. That's why I paid attention when your family started talking. Men like you are rare, Daniel. And rare men are usually surrounded by people who take them for granted. Emotion tightened my throat unexpectedly. All these years, I had believed sacrifice meant nothing because my own family treated it like obligation. Yet a stranger remembered one act of kindness for nearly 3 decades. The irony nearly broke me. Vincent leaned back against his pillow. My brother died 5 years ago, but before he passed, he told me something I never forgot. He looked directly at me. He said the man who saved him looked exhausted even then, like he spent his whole life carrying everyone else. I closed my eyes because suddenly I felt unbearably tired. Not physically, spiritually. Tired of earning love. Tired of proving value. Tired of being needed but never truly cared for. The next morning, everything changed. Because at 8:17 a.m., while Karen was buying coffee downstairs and Tyler thought I was asleep again, Emily entered my hospital room alone, carrying a folder she clearly didn't want anyone else seeing. She stood beside my bed quietly for several seconds before whispering, "I'm sorry, Dad." My eyes remained shut, but every nerve in my body went alert. Papers rustled softly. Then she whispered something that made my blood freeze solid. "Once you sign this, everything will finally be over." Emily slid the folder onto the tray table beside my bed, so carefully it almost looked loving. For one weak moment, I wanted to believe it was normal hospital paperwork. But then she whispered into her phone, "No, he's still out cold. Tyler, relax. Once he signs, everything gets easier." My chest tightened. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to sleep while she flipped through legal documents. "Temporary control authorization medical incapacity," she muttered nervously. That's when I realized they weren't just worried about my recovery. They were preparing to take everything before I got better. When I finally opened my eyes, Emily jumped. "Dad, thank God you scared me." I stared at the folder. "What is that?" "Just insurance paperwork." She lied instantly. I held out my hand. "Then let me read it." Her expression changed for half a second before she reluctantly handed it over. My stomach dropped as I read the pages. Company authority transfers. Financial control provisions. Authorization for my son Tyler to act on behalf of my business while I remained medically restricted. My own children had prepared legal documents to take control while I lay hooked to machines. "You tried to trick me into signing this?" I asked quietly. Emily crossed her arms defensively. "We were trying to protect things." "Protect?" I laughed bitterly. "Tyler can barely manage his own life." Her face hardened. "You controlled us our entire lives." That hurt more than the surgery. Every sacrifice I'd ever made for them had somehow turned into resentment instead of gratitude. Then the stranger in the next bed finally spoke. Vincent lowered his newspaper and calmly said, "Interesting way to describe parents who spend decades cleaning up your mistakes." Emily flushed with anger. "This is none of your business." Vincent didn't even blink. "Your father nearly died, and all any of you discuss is ownership." She stormed out moments later, slamming the door behind her. That night, I replayed every red flag I had ignored over the years. Tyler asking strange questions about inheritance. Emily pushing me to simplify estate paperwork. Karen convincing me to put properties in her name for tax reasons. Around 3 a.m., I made one call and everything changed. My lawyer began quietly freezing accounts, protecting the company, and investigating suspicious transactions connected to my family. They had no idea what I had already done. The next morning, Tyler arrived acting concerned. "The company needs stability," he explained when I confronted him about the paperwork. "You never trusted me." I stared at him quietly before answering. "Because you've never been trustworthy." He looked offended, but not hurt, just angry that I was standing in the way. Later that day, my lawyer uncovered everything. Tyler had secretly used company assets to secure massive loans. Emily's husband had been receiving hidden payments. And Karen had been having an affair for over a year, while secretly approving financial transfers behind my back. Looking at the photos of her with another man hurt more than anything else. Not because I still loved her, because I realized our marriage had been dying long before my heart attack. 3 weeks later, I left the hospital pretending I knew nothing. Quiet husband, recovering father. Meanwhile, legal plans moved silently beneath my family's feet. That was their biggest mistake. They underestimated a man who had finally stopped ignoring the truth. The confrontation happened during a family dinner. Tyler talked about investments. Emily complained about bills. Karen discussed remodeling the lake house. Not one of them asked how I was feeling. Finally, I placed several folders on the table. Fraud reports, frozen account notices, divorce papers. Silence swallowed the room. "You investigated us?" Tyler snapped. "You stole from me." I replied calmly. Karen stared at the divorce papers in shock. "You can't be serious." I've never been more serious in my life. Emily started crying, begging me not to destroy the family. I looked at all of them and quietly said, "The moment you thought I might die, you started planning life without me." Nobody denied it. I stood slowly and looked at them one last time. If any of you had simply sat beside my hospital bed because you were afraid of losing me, none of this would have happened. But instead, you treated my survival like an inconvenience. Then I walked away. Months later, Tyler lost his business reputation. Emily's marriage collapsed under debt. Karen's affair ended once the money disappeared. And me? I finally understood something the stranger in the next hospital bed had known from the beginning. The people who survive betrayal rarely become colder. They become clearer.